Welcome, dear listeners, to this delightful journey into the world of classic British mystery. I'm thrilled to present Miss Marple and the Curse of the Hollow Drum, a Miss Marple story, a cozy detective tale in the timeless style of Agatha Christie. Join the sharp-witted Miss Jane Marple as she unravels a puzzling enigma in the quaint village of St. Mary, Mead. Settle in with a cup of tea, relax, and let the story unfold. This audiobook is divided into 10 chapters for your convenience, with approximate timestamps based on a leisurely narration pace. Total runtime, about 90 minutes. And now, let us begin. Chapter 1. The Echo of the Drum. In the heart of St. Mary, Mead, a village cradled by the gentle hills of rural England in the early 1950s, life unfolded with the quiet rhythm of seasons. The cottages, with their thatched roofs and ivy-clad walls, stood like sentinels along winding lanes, their gardens bursting with roses and hollyhocks despite the crisp bite of autumn. The village green, fringed by ancient oaks, was the hub of community life, a place where children played, gossips lingered, and the church clock chimed with reassuring regularity. It was, in short, a place of comforting predictability, where the extraordinary rarely dared to intrude. Or so it seemed. Miss Jane Marple, a spinster of advanced years, resided in a modest cottage overlooking the green. Her home was a study in understated elegance. Lace curtains framed the windows. A polished oak table held her cherished teapot, and her knitting basket sat ever at the ready. With her fluffy white hair pinned neatly and her spectacles perched on her nose, Miss Marple appeared the very picture of harmless old age. Her neighbors thought her a dear, if slightly eccentric figure, always knitting, always observing, always offering a gentle smile. But those who mistook her mild demeanor for a lack of sharpness did so at their peril. Miss Marple's blue eyes missed nothing, and her mind, honed by decades of watching human nature, could unravel secrets as deftly as she unraveled a skein of wool. A piece of sacred baobab wood was a striking object, tall and cylindrical, its surface etched with intricate symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Its hollow interior produced a deep, resonant boom when struck, a sound that carried far across the quiet village. But it was not the drum's craftsmanship that had set tongues wagging. It was the legend attached to it, a curse, whispered about in hushed tones. According to the tale, the drum was sacred to a long-forgotten tribe, and any who dared to sound it after dusk would invite misfortune, even death. The villagers, practical folk for the most part, had scoffed at the notion when Sir Reginald first displayed the drum at the village hall. But now, in the cold light of morning, their laughter had turned to dread. Miss Marple was sipping her morning tea, the steam curling upward in delicate wisps, when her young maid, Cherry Baker, burst into the parlor. Cherry, a cheerful girl with a penchant for gossip, was flushed with excitement, her apron slightly askew. "Oh, Miss Marple," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with the thrill of news. "Have you heard? It's dreadful, simply dreadful. Sir Reginald's been found dead in his study. Stone cold, they say, with that wretched drum right beside him. No marks, no blood, nothing. Just dead as a doornail." Miss Marple set her teacup down with care, her expression serene but her eyes sharpening like polished steel. "Dear me," she said softly. "How very tragic. And when did this occur?" "Last night, miss," Cherry said, her hands fluttering. "Mrs. Ellis found him this morning slumped over his desk. But that's not the worst of it. The whole village heard that drum last night. Boom, boom, boom at midnight. low and eerie, like a heartbeat from the grave. Everyone's saying it's the curse of the hollow drum. Whoever beats it after dark invites doom. Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Curses, my dear Cherry, are often the invention of very human minds. Tell me, what do the villagers say about the drums sounding? Cherry leaned. Stranger from London, a Mr. Silas Blackwood, some sort of antique dealer. He was poking around, asking about the drum's value. Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully, her mind already sorting through the names like cards in a deck. 4 visitors, she murmured, and 1 dead man. I think, Cherry, I shall pay a visit to the manor. It is only proper to offer condolences in such a time of loss. Cherry hesitated. But miss, what if it is the curse? Folks are saying, folks, Miss Marple interrupted gently, are often mistaken. Now fetch my shawl, dear. The air is chilly this morning. By midday, Miss Marple was making her way along the lane to the manor house, her basket of knitting tucked under her arm. The village was alive with activity. Neighbors gathered in knots, their voices low and urgent, their eyes darting toward the manor. The local constable, Inspector Slack, a sturdy man with a brusque manner, was already at the scene, his notebook open and his expression one of impatient certainty. Slack had little patience for mysteries, preferring straightforward explanations, and he had already declared Sir Reginald's death a heart attack, natural causes, given the man's age and sedentary habits. Sad business, Miss Marple, Slack said as she approached the manor's wrought iron gates. But nothing to fuss over. Old man's heart gave out. Happens all the time. Indeed, Miss Marple replied, her tone mild. And yet, I understand there was quite a commotion last night with that drum. Did you hear it, Inspector? Slack snorted. Village nonsense, probably some prankster. I've got better things to do than chase ghost stories. Miss Marple inclined her head, her smile polite but unconvinced. She passed through the gates and up the gravel path to the manor, where Mrs. Ellis, the housekeeper, greeted her with a weary sigh. Mrs. Ellis was a stout woman in her 50s, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, her apron starched to perfection despite the morning's chaos. Terrible business, miss, she said, leading Miss Marple into the grand but slightly shabby hall. Sir Reginald trained eye. It spoke volumes. A sign of something moved, perhaps dragged, in haste. Who was here last evening, Mrs. Ellis? She asked, her voice as gentle as a summer breeze. The housekeeper wrung her hands. Well, let me see. Mr. Victor, of course, Sir Reginald's nephew. He came around 6, talking about family matters. Then Miss Lydia Grant, the school teacher, about the fete. She left around 7. Reverend Caldwell was here too, going on about the drum being a work of the devil. And that Mr. Blackwood from London, he arrived late, near 8, wanting to buy the drum. Sir Reginald sent him packing, though, said it wasn't for sale. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. And after they left, did Sir Reginald seem himself? As much as ever, Mrs. Ellis said. He had his tea as usual and said he'd work late. I locked up at 9 and went to bed. Didn't hear a thing until the drum. Miss Marple thanked her and lingered in the study, her gaze returning to the drum. 4 visitors, each with their own reasons for being there. Greed, perhaps, for Victor, who stood to inherit. Jealousy for Lydia, whose feelings for Sir Reginald were an open secret. Moral outrage for the Reverend, who despised the drum's pagan origins. And ambition for Blackwood, whose interest in the drum was all too clear. But a heart attack? Miss Marple's instincts told her otherwise. The scuff mark, the drum's hollow echo, the timing of that midnight beat, it all pointed to something far more deliberate than a curse. As she left the manor, the village green was bathed in golden light, the air filled with the scent of wood smoke and damp leaves. Miss Marple paused, watching a group of children playing near the church. One of them, a boy with a mischievous grin, was tapping a stick against a tin can, mimicking the drum's ominous beat. She smiled faintly. Children, she thought, often saw what adults missed. And, so it seemed, did elderly spinsters with a knack for noticing the ordinary. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Manor. The following afternoon, Miss Marple, soothing counterpoint to the tension that hung in the air. The manor was hosting a small gathering of those closest to Sir Reginald, or more accurately, those who had been closest to his final hours. Mrs. Ellis, ever the dutiful housekeeper, had arranged for tea and biscuits, and the mourners now assembled, their faces a mix of grief, suspicion, and carefully veiled unease. First to arrive was Victor Hawthorne, Sir Reginald's nephew, a man whose handsome features were marred by a perpetual air of entitlement. In his early 30s, Victor cut a dashing figure in a tailored tweed suit, his dark hair slicked back with pomade, his smile just a touch too practiced. He strode into the room with the confidence of one who expected to inherit, his polished shoes clicking on the parquet floor. "Aunt Jane, Miss Marple," he greeted her, his tone caught between familiarity and discomfort. Dreadful business, this. Uncle was getting on, of course, but this curse nonsense. Utter rubbish. He probably overexerted himself banging on that silly drum. Miss Marple inclined her head, her expression benign but her mind alert. Indeed, Mr. Hawthorne. And yet, the drum did sound last night, did it not? Were you at the manor when it did? Victor's smile faltered, just for a moment. Me? Oh, no, I left around 6. Had a pint at the Red Lion after. Ask anyone. He laughed a little too loudly and helped himself to a biscuit, crumbs scattering on his lapel. Miss Marple noted his quick deflection. Victor stood to inherit the manor and its contents, including the drum, which was rumored to be worth a small fortune to collectors. Greed, she mused, was a powerful motive, and Victor's casual dismissal of the curse seemed rehearsed, as if he were eager to steer conversation away from his presence at the manor. Next to enter was Miss Lydia Grant, the village schoolteacher, a woman in her early 40s whose prim demeanor belied a nervous energy. Her spectacles glinted in the firelight, and her hands twisted together as she took a seat opposite Miss Marple. Lydia's dress was modest, a navy wool frock with harbored a quiet affection for Sir Reginald, a widower who had shown her kindness but little else. Unrequited love, Miss Marple knew, could fester into something darker. Jealousy, perhaps, or resentment. The door opened again, admitting Reverend Arthur Caldwell, the vicar of St. Mary Mead's ancient church. A portly man in his 50s, with a florid face and a voice that boomed even in casual conversation, he carried an air of righteous authority. His black clerical garb was immaculate, though his collar seemed a touch too tight, and his eyes held a flicker of unease as he greeted the room. "A sad loss to our community," he intoned, clasping his hands before him. "I warned Sir Reginald about meddling with pagan artifacts. The Lord works in mysterious ways, but such things invite calamity." Miss Marple's needles paused briefly. "You saw him yesterday, I believe, Reverend? About the drum, perhaps?" Caldwell's jaw tightened. "Indeed, I urged him to rid himself of that unholy object. It's an idol, Miss Marple, a relic of godless rituals. I offered to take it for safekeeping, but he laughed me off. His voice carried a note of indignation, and Miss Marple recalled the village gossip. The Reverend had clashed publicly with Sir Reginald over the drum, fearing its presence would corrupt the village's moral fiber. Zeal, she thought, could mask other motives. Perhaps a desire to control, or to conceal. Last to arrive was Mr. Silas Blackwood, the antique dealer from London, a thin, sharp-featured man whose calculating gaze seemed to appraise everything in the room, from the silver candlesticks to the mourners themselves. His suit was expensive but slightly ill-fitting, as if he were unused to such finery, and his manner was smooth, almost too polished. "Miss Marple," he said, bowing slightly. "A tragedy, this. I offered to buy the drum, you know, a rare piece, worth a fortune to the right collector. But Sir Reginald refused. Stubborn old chap." "Stubborn indeed," Miss Marple replied, carefully curated accounts of their visits. Victor spoke of family matters, his tone vague. Lydia mentioned the fete again, her voice faltering. Caldwell recounted his warnings about the drum, his words heavy with piety. Blackwood claimed he'd left early, disappointed but resigned. Yet Miss Marple's sharp ears caught the subtle inconsistencies. Victor's overly casual mention of the pub, Lydia's nervous fidgeting, Caldwell's defensive posture, Blackwood's guarded precision. As tea was poured, Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the room's details. The scuff mark she'd noted in the study, now echoed by a faint scratch on the drawing room's floor, as if a heavy object had been shifted. The drum, perhaps, or something hidden within its hollow core. She recalled the drum's resonant hum, its carvings, the legend of its curse. A hollow drum, she mused, was an ideal place to conceal something. Papers, perhaps, or something more sinister. And the scuff mark suggested movement, haste, secrecy. "Mrs. Ellis," Miss Marple said, her voice mild. "Did Sir Reginald keep anything inside the drum? It is hollow, after all." The housekeeper blinked, startled. "Inside? Oh no, miss, it's just a drum. He'd tap it now and then to show off its sound, but that's all." Miss Marple nodded, her smile serene, but her mind was racing. 4 suspects, each with a motive: greed, jealousy, moral outrage, ambition. And the drum with its haunting echo seemed to hold the key. As the gathering dispersed, Victor lingering to charm Mrs. Ellis, Lydia hurrying out with a flushed face, Caldwell muttering prayers, and Blackwood slipping away like a shadow. Miss Marple felt the threads of the mystery tightening. The curse, she was certain, was no supernatural force. It was human, all too human, and she intended to unravel it. Chapter 3. Whispers Among the Roses. Timestamp 1730 to 2600. The morning after the somber gathering at the manor house, St. Gray. As Miss Marple pushed open the door, a small bell jingled, announcing her arrival to the handful of villagers already seated. Mrs. Price, a plump woman in her 50s with a penchant for floral aprons and an encyclopedic knowledge of local affairs, looked up from behind the counter, her eyes bright with the promise of news. "Good morning, Miss Marple," Mrs. Price called, wiping her hands on a tea towel. "Terrible business at the manor, isn't it? I was just telling Mrs. Dobbs here that drum's cursed, mark my words. Sir Reginald's great-uncle brought it back from the colonies. And he died mysteriously too. Heart stopped, just like that. It's no coincidence. Miss Marple settled into a chair near the window, her knitting needles emerging from her basket with practiced ease. "How fascinating, Mrs. Price," she said, her voice mild but her eyes keen. "And did you hear the drum yourself last night? That midnight echo everyone's talking about?" Mrs. Price leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Clear as day, miss. I was in bed, windows open to let in the cool air, and there it was. Boom, boom, boom. Like a warning from the grave. Gave me chills, it did. And Mr. Dobbs, the butcher, said he saw a light flickering in the manor's study just before it sounded. Something's not right, I tell you." Miss Marple's needles clicked rhythmically, a soothing counterpoint to the tea shop's buzz. "A light, you say? How intriguing. And what else have the villagers noticed? Any unusual comings and goings near the manor?" Mrs. Price's eyes gleamed. "Well, now that you mention it, Miss Lydia Grant was seen walking near the manor late last night, long after she said she'd left. Odd for a school teacher to be out so late. And young Mr. Victor Hawthorne, he was spotted leaving the Red Lion well after 10, looking furtive if you ask me. Oh, and that London fellow, Mr. Blackwood, was asking all sorts of questions about the drum at the inn yesterday. Wanted to know if it was insured." Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully, filing away each walls. Lydia looked up, startled as Miss Marple entered, her face paling. "Oh, Miss Marple," Lydia said, her voice high and strained. I didn't expect you. Is this about Sir Reginald? It's so dreadful, isn't it?" She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, revealing a smudge of ink on her sleeve. The same shade, Miss Marple noted, as the blotter on Sir Reginald's desk. "Indeed it is," Miss Marple replied, settling into a chair and opening her knitting. "I understand you visited him yesterday, about the village fete. He was to donate the drum, was he not?" Lydia nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "Yes, he promised to display it at the fete, to draw a crowd. He showed me how it worked. That sound, it was so eerie, Miss Marple, like something alive. I told him I didn't like it, that it felt wrong. He promised to destroy it after I left, but..." Her voice trailed off, and she looked away, her cheeks flushing. "Destroy it?" Miss Marple's tone was gentle, but her eyes sharpened. "That's a strong word, Miss Grant. Did he seem distressed when you spoke?" Lydia hesitated, her fingers twisting together. "Not distressed exactly. Distracted, perhaps. He kept looking at the drum, as if it held some secret. I left around 7, but, well, I walked past the manor later just to clear my head. I couldn't sleep, you see." Her voice faltered, and Miss Marple noted the defensive edge. Lydia's affection for Sir Reginald was no secret in the village, and unrequited love, as Miss Marple knew from observing many a village romance, could breed bitterness, or worse. "Thank you, Miss Grant," Miss Marple said, rising. "You've been most helpful." As she left, she glanced at the ink smudge again, her mind turning over the possibility that Lydia had lingered at the manor longer than she claimed. A clue, perhaps, or merely a coincidence. Miss Marple was not one to jump to conclusions, but she tucked the observation away like a stitch in her knitting. Her next, "But he dismissed me. Laughed even." His voice carried a note of indignation, and Miss Marple's keen eyes caught a curious detail. Among the Reverend's books was a volume on African folklore, its spine well worn. Odd, she thought, for a man who claimed to despise the drum's origins. "Did you hear the drum last night, Reverend?" she asked, her tone as mild as ever. Caldwell hesitated, his eyes flickering. I was asleep by then. The vicarage is too far to hear such things clearly. But I've no doubt it was some prankster stirring up trouble." His words were firm, but Miss Marple sensed a guardedness, as if he were choosing them with care. She thanked him and took her leave, pausing in the vicarage garden to examine the herbs. Among the lavender and rosemary was a cluster of foxgloves, their bell-shaped flowers deceptively pretty. Digitalis, Miss Marple recalled, could be derived from foxgloves, a heart stimulant in small doses, a poison in larger ones. She made a mental note, her mind weaving connections like threads in a pattern. Her final stop was the Red Lion, the village pub, where Victor Hawthorne was said to have spent the evening. The pub was a cozy, low-ceilinged place, its walls adorned with brass horseshoes and faded photographs of cricket matches. Mr. Tompkins, the publican, was polishing glasses behind the bar, his round face genial but alert. "Afternoon, Miss Marple," he said. "Come about Sir Reginald, I reckon?" "Bad business." "Quite so," Miss Marple replied, her needles clicking. "I understand Mr. Victor was here last night. Did he stay long?" Tompkins nodded. "Came in around 6:30, had a pint or two. Left about 10, maybe later. Seemed in a hurry, mind you. Kept checking his watch, like he had somewhere to be." Miss Marple's smile was serene. "And did he mention his uncle? Or the drum?" "Not a word about the drum," Tompkins said, leaning closer. "But he did say something about sorting things out with Sir Reginald. Sounded like they'd had a row." Garden, Victor's late departure, Blackwood's evasiveness. All were threads in a tapestry not yet fully woven. The curse, she was certain, was a convenient fiction, a smokescreen for human motives. Greed, jealousy, piety, ambition. Each suspect had a reason to wish Sir Reginald ill. But which had acted? As the church clock struck 3, Miss Marple set her knitting aside and reached for her tea. The village was quiet now, the mist lifting to reveal the golden hues of autumn. But beneath the calm, she sensed a current of secrets waiting to be unraveled. And unravel them she would, one careful stitch at a time. Chapter 4. The False Trail. The afternoon sun dipped low over St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across the village green and gilding the thatched roofs with a warm golden glow. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and the faint tang of apples from the orchards beyond the church. Miss Jane Marple, her shawl draped neatly over her shoulders, and her knitting basket tucked under her arm, walked with measured steps toward the manor house. Her mind, however, was anything but idle, sifting through the threads of gossip and observation she had gathered over the past day. The death of Sir Reginald Hawthorne, found lifeless beside the enigmatic hollow drum, had stirred the village into a frenzy of speculation, and Miss Marple was determined to separate fact from fiction. The manor house loomed ahead, its Georgian facade imposing yet weathered, ivy clinging to its stonework like secrets to a guilty conscience. The talk of a curse, the curse of the hollow drum, had taken root in St. Mary Mead, fueled by the eerie midnight boom that had echoed through the village the night of Sir Reginald's death. The drum, a tall, intricately carved artifact from West Africa, was said to bring misfortune to any who sounded it after dusk. Inspector Slack, the local constable, had dismissed it all as nonsense, insisting Sir Reginald's death was a simple heart attack. But Miss Marple, with her keen, "That wretched thing." Mrs. Price swears she saw it from her window. And now everyone's saying, it's the curse come to life. Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. A ghostly figure? How very dramatic. And what did this figure do, precisely? Mrs. Ellis shivered. Just stood there, they say, beating the drum. 3 slow booms, then vanished into the night. Folks are scared, Miss Marple. Some won't even walk past the manor after dark now. Miss Marple nodded, her knitting needles emerging from her basket with a soft clink. Fear, my dear Mrs. Ellis, is a powerful distraction. May I see the study again? I'd like to offer my respects, in a manner of speaking. Mrs. Ellis led her to the study, where the hollow drum still stood on its mahogany pedestal, its carved surface gleaming in the afternoon light. The room was much as Miss Marple had left it, shelves lined with dusty tomes, glass cases filled with artifacts, and Sir Reginald's desk, cluttered with papers and a silver inkstand. She approached the drum, her eyes scanning the floor. The scuff mark she had noticed yesterday was still there, faint but unmistakable, suggesting something had been moved or hidden in haste. She tapped the drum lightly with her knitting needle, and a low, resonant hum filled the room, followed by a faint rattle from within. Curious, Miss Marple murmured, her gaze sharpening. Mrs. Ellis, has anyone examined the drum closely since Sir Reginald's passing? The housekeeper shook her head. Not that I know of, miss. Inspector Slack said it wasn't important, just a piece of old wood. But Sir Reginald was particular about it, kept it polished, never let anyone touch it without his say-so. Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. A hollow drum was a perfect hiding place, perhaps for documents, or something more sinister. The rattle suggested something loose inside, a bead or a small object, perhaps overlooked in the chaos of the previous day. She made a mental note to investigate further, keeping folks calm without chasing shadows. Miss Marple inclined her head, her smile polite but unconvinced. Naturally, but it might be worth asking around. Shadows, after all, are often cast by very real objects. Slack muttered something about meddling spinsters and strode off, leaving Miss Marple to continue her walk. Her next stop was the tea shop, where the air was thick with gossip and the scent of freshly baked scones. Mrs. Price, ever the purveyor of village news, was holding court behind the counter, her eyes bright with excitement. "Miss Marple," she exclaimed. "You've heard about the ghost, I presume? I saw it myself, plain as day, standing by the manor gate. Cloaked it was, with a hood, and it struck that drum. 3 times, slow and deliberate. I nearly dropped my teacup." "How extraordinary," Miss Marple said, settling into a chair and opening her knitting. "And what time was this, Mrs. Price?" "Just before midnight," Mrs. Price replied, leaning forward. "I couldn't sleep, what with all the talk of Sir Reginald's death. I looked out my window, and there it was. Gave me goosebumps, it did." Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. "And did you see where this figure went after striking the drum?" Mrs. Price hesitated, her brow furrowing. "Well, no, not exactly. It seemed to melt away into the shadows. By the time I got my spectacles on, it was gone. Miss Marple nodded, her mind turning over the details. A cloaked figure, conveniently vague, appearing just long enough to fuel the curse narrative. It was too theatrical, too perfectly timed to be coincidence. She thanked Mrs. Price and sipped her tea, her gaze drifting to the other patrons. Among them was Victor Hawthorne, Sir Reginald's nephew, nursing a cup of coffee and looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Mr. Hawthorne," Miss Marple said, approaching his table with a smile. "I hear the village is abuzz with talk of a ghostly visitor. What do you make of it?" Victor's laugh was forced, his fingers drumming nervously. Presence at the Red Lion placed him near the manor at the crucial hour. She thanked him and moved on, her thoughts circling back to the other suspects. Her next inquiry was with Miss Lydia Grant, whom she found in the schoolhouse garden, weeding with more vigor than necessary. Lydia's face was pale, her spectacles slipping as she looked up. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice trembling. "This ghost talk, it's upsetting the children. I had to cancel classes today. They're saying the drum's cursed, that it killed Sir Reginald. Children do have vivid imaginations," Miss Marple said, her tone soothing. "But you were near the manor last night, I believe. Did you see anything unusual?" Lydia's hands froze, a weed dangling from her fingers. I was just walking, clearing my head. I didn't see any ghost, if that's what you mean. But I heard the drum, yes. It was awful." Her voice cracked, and Miss Marple noted the faint ink smudge still on her sleeve, a reminder of her presence in Sir Reginald's study. "And how did Sir Reginald seem when you left him?" Miss Marple asked, her needles clicking softly. "Distracted," Lydia said quickly. "He was always distracted by his artifacts. That drum, it consumed him. I told him it was dangerous, but he wouldn't listen." Her eyes filled with tears, and Miss Marple wondered if they were for Sir Reginald or for something else. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. Her final stop was the village inn, where Mr. Silas Blackwood was staying. She found him in the parlor, writing a letter, his sharp features set in a frown. "Miss Marple," he said, rising with a practiced smile. "Come to join the ghost hunt? I assure you I saw nothing last night. I was in my room by 9. "Indeed," Miss Marple replied, her gaze lingering on the letter. "And yet, you were asking about the drum's security yesterday. Were you concerned it might be stolen?" Blackwood's smile tightened. "A valuable piece like that? Of course I was concerned. But Sir Reginald was stubborn. He wouldn't sell, wouldn't even let me examine it closely. A pity, really." Miss Marple. Chapter 5. Tea and Deception. The late afternoon sun bathed St. Mary Mead in a soft amber glow, painting the thatched cottages and the village green with a warmth that belied the chill of suspicion settling over the community. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cozy parlor, the lace curtains diffusing the light into delicate patterns across her polished oak table. Her knitting needles clicked with a steady rhythm, a counterpoint to the whirl of thoughts in her sharp mind. The death of Sir Reginald Hawthorne, found lifeless beside the hollow drum with its whispered curse, had stirred the village into a frenzy of gossip and fear. The talk of a ghostly figure striking the drum at midnight had only deepened the mystery, and while Inspector Slack dismissed it all as a heart attack, Miss Marple's instincts told her otherwise. The scuff mark in the study, the ink smudge on Miss Lydia Grant's sleeve, the foxgloves in Reverend Caldwell's garden. These were threads in a tapestry of human motives, not supernatural ones. Determined to unravel the truth, Miss Marple had invited the key figures in Sir Reginald's final hours to her cottage for afternoon tea. It was a classic maneuver, one she had employed many times, a gathering under the guise of neighborly hospitality, where tongues might loosen and secrets might slip. Her parlor was prepared with care, her best china teacups arranged on a lace tablecloth, a plate of freshly baked scones from Mrs. Price's tea shop, and a pot of Earl Grey steaming gently. The scent of tea and warm pastry filled the room, mingling with the faint perfume of roses from her garden, visible through the open window. It was a setting designed to put her guests at ease, though Miss Marple knew that beneath the civility, tension simmered. The first to arrive was Victor Hawthorne, Sir Reginald's nephew, his tailored tweed suit slightly rumpled from a morning spent dodging village gossip. His dark hair was slicked back, but a nervous energy betrayed his usual swagger. "Miss Marple," he said, offering a charming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "This is awfully kind of you. I could use a break from all the talk of curses and ghosts." "You're very welcome, Mr. Hawthorne." Expecting an ambush. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice high and strained. "Thank you for the invitation. I haven't been myself since, well, you know." "Quite understandable, Miss Grant," Miss Marple said, pouring tea with practiced grace. "Such a shock for the village. I believe you saw Sir Reginald about the fete, did you not? He was to donate that remarkable drum." Lydia nodded, her hands twisting the handkerchief. "Yes, he promised to display it. He showed me how it sounded, so eerie, Miss Marple. I told him it felt wrong, but he just laughed." Her voice faltered, and Miss Marple noted the ink smudge still on her sleeve, a silent reminder of her presence in Sir Reginald's study. Lydia's unrequited affection for the late antiquarian was well known, and Miss Marple wondered if jealousy had driven her to act, or to conceal. Reverend Arthur Caldwell arrived next, his black clerical garb lending him an air of solemn authority, though his florid face betrayed a flicker of unease. "Miss Marple," he boomed, settling heavily into a chair. "Your hospitality is a balm in these troubling times. Sir Reginald's death is a warning, I fear, against meddling with unholy relics." "Indeed, Reverend," Miss Marple said, offering him a scone. "You were quite firm with him about the drum, I understand. Did he heed your advice?" Caldwell's jaw tightened. "He did not. I told him it was an idol, a temptation to sin. I offered to take it into the church's care, but he mocked me. Said it was just a piece of art." His voice carried a note of indignation, and Miss Marple recalled the book on African folklore in his study. An odd choice for a man so vehemently opposed to the drum's origins. Last to arrive was Mr. Silas Blackwood, the antique dealer from London, his sharp features and calculating gaze at odds with the cozy setting. His suit, though expensive, hung loosely on his thin frame, and his smile was a touch too polished. "Miss Marple," he said, bowing slightly. "A charming gathering, though I suspect," her voice trembling as she mentioned the drum's haunting sound. Caldwell reiterated his warnings about the drum's pagan nature, his piety bordering on theatrical. Blackwood claimed he'd left early, disappointed but resigned, though Miss Marple recalled the innkeeper's mention of him writing a letter late that night. The talk turned to the ghostly figure, which had become the village's obsession. "Utter nonsense," Victor declared, leaning back in his chair. "Some prankster stirring up trouble. Though I wouldn't put it past those antique dealers to stage something dramatic to drive up the drum's value." He glanced at Blackwood, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I heard it myself," Lydia said, her voice barely above a whisper. That awful boom at midnight. I was awake, you see, and, well, I couldn't sleep after seeing Sir Reginald. I felt so foolish for arguing with him. Her cheeks flushed, and Miss Marple noted the admission. Lydia had argued with Sir Reginald, a detail she hadn't mentioned before. Caldwell shook his head solemnly. The drum is a tool of darkness. I warned him, but he wouldn't listen. Perhaps the Lord sent a sign, a warning to us all. His words were heavy, but Miss Marple caught a flicker of unease in his eyes, as if he feared scrutiny. Blackwood sipped his tea, his expression unreadable. Ghosts? Hardly. But I did hear Sir Reginald had a rival bidder for the drum, some collector from abroad. Perhaps they weren't pleased when he refused to sell. Miss Marple's needles paused briefly. A rival bidder? It was the first she'd heard of such a thing, and Blackwood's casual mention felt calculated, as if to shift suspicion elsewhere. She made a mental note, her mind returning to the drum itself. Its hollow interior, the faint rattle she'd heard, the scuff mark on the study floor, these were clues that pointed to something hidden, perhaps a key to Sir Reginald's death. As the conversation continued, Cherry Baker, Miss Marple's young maid, entered with a fresh pot of tea. Poison, perhaps, administered slowly to mimic a heart attack. She recalled the foxgloves in Reverend Caldwell's garden, a source of digitalis, a substance that could kill if dosed improperly. The drum's rattles suggested a hidden compartment, a place to conceal a vial or packet. But who had access to both the tea and the drum? As the tea party drew to a close, the guests dispersed, each offering polite thanks but leaving an air of unease in their wake. Victor lingered, chatting with Cherry about the weather. Lydia hurried out, clutching her handkerchief. Caldwell murmured a blessing and left with heavy steps. Blackwood slipped away like a shadow, his letter tucked into his pocket. Miss Marple watched them go, her knitting a steady rhythm as she pieced together the day's revelations. The ghostly figure, she was certain, was a deliberate misdirection, a ploy to reinforce the curse narrative and keep suspicion at bay. But the tea tin, the rattle in the drum, the suspect's guarded responses, these were the true clues. Victor's greed, Lydia's jealousy, Caldwell's zeal, Blackwood's ambition, each had a motive, but the method remained elusive. As the church clock chimed 5, Miss Marple set her knitting aside and reached for her shawl. The truth, she knew, was hidden in the ordinary, and she was determined to find it, one careful stitch at a time. Chapter 6. Midnight Echoes. Timestamp 4300 to 5130. The twilight of St. Mary Mead was a quiet affair, with the village settling into a hush as the last rays of sunlight faded behind the rolling hills. The air carried the cool, crisp scent of autumn, tinged with wood smoke and the faint perfume of late roses. In her cozy cottage, Miss Jane Marple sat by her parlor window, her knitting needles idle for once, her sharp eyes fixed on the darkening lane outside. The death of Sir Reginald Hawthorne, found lifeless beside the hollow drum with its whispered curse, had woven a web of suspicion over the village. The talk of a ghostly figure striking the drum at midnight had fueled fears of a supernatural cause. But Miss Marple, with her keen understanding of Cherry, and the suspect's guarded responses at her tea gathering suggested a deliberate act, cloaked in superstition. Tonight, she resolved to listen, for the drum or for something else. The manor house was a short walk from her cottage, its silhouette looming against the starry sky. The wrought iron gates creaked as she pushed them open, and the gravel path crunched softly under her sensible shoes. The village was silent, save for the distant hoot of an owl and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. As she neared the manor, a faint sound caught her ear. A low, resonant boom, like the echo of a heartbeat. The drum, she thought, her pulse quickening. It was midnight, and the sound came from the direction of the manor's study. Moving with surprising stealth for an elderly spinster, Miss Marple approached the side of the house, keeping to the shadows of the ivy-clad walls. The study's tall windows were dark, but a faint flicker of light danced within, as if someone had lit a candle and quickly extinguished it. She crept closer, her torch unlit to avoid detection, and peered through a gap in the curtains. The room was empty, the drum standing silent on its pedestal, but the air felt charged, as if it held the memory of that eerie sound. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the manor's side door. A tall, lean shape in a dark coat, moving swiftly toward the garden. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, recognizing the sharp features of Mr. Silas Blackwood, the antique dealer from London. He glanced around, his movements furtive, before disappearing into the shrubbery. "Just checking on my investment," he had said at her tea gathering, but his presence here, at midnight, suggested more than a casual interest. Miss Marple waited until he was out of sight, then slipped into the manor through the unlocked side door. A lapse she noted with interest, as Mrs. Ellis was meticulous about locking up. The study was as she remembered it: shelves of dusty tomes, glass cases of artifacts, and the drum, its carved surface gleaming faintly in the moonlight. She approached it. Perfect vehicle for poison, administered gradually, perhaps, to mimic a heart attack. Digitalis, derived from the foxgloves in Reverend Caldwell's garden, could achieve such an effect, slowing the heart until it stopped. But who had placed the vial in the drum? And who had sounded it at midnight, reinforcing the curse narrative? As she stood, a shadow moved outside the window, and Miss Marple froze, her torch still unlit. The figure was gone before she could identify it, but the crunch of gravel suggested someone was near. She slipped out of the study and into the hall, her senses alert. The manor was silent, but the air felt heavy with secrets. She made her way back to the lane, her torch now casting a narrow beam to guide her steps, and returned to her cottage, her mind buzzing with the night's discoveries. The next morning, Miss Marple sat in her parlor, sipping tea and reviewing her findings. The vial was a breakthrough, but it raised more questions. Had it been used to poison Sir Reginald's tea, or was it a decoy, part of the misdirection that included the ghostly figure? She recalled the suspect's behavior at her tea gathering. Victor Hawthorne's nervous charm, Lydia Grant's trembling admissions, Reverend Caldwell's pious indignation, Silas Blackwood's calculated smoothness. Each had a motive: greed, jealousy, zeal, ambition. But the method was becoming clearer. Determined to test her theory, Miss Marple enlisted Cherry's help. "Cherry, dear," she said as the young maid cleared the breakfast dishes, "I need you to pay a visit to Mrs. Ellis. Ask her about Sir Reginald's tea tin, whether it was disturbed in the days before his death, and see if she noticed anything unusual about the drum. perhaps a visitor lingering near it. Cherry nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. "Right away, miss. I'll be discreet, don't you worry." While Cherry was gone, Miss said he was admiring it, but he looked shifty. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Shifty, you say? How very interesting. And what of the others?" Mrs. Ellis said Miss Lydia was upset when she left, almost in tears. And Mr. Victor, he was pacing the hall, muttering about getting what's owed. Reverend Caldwell, though, he was calm as you like, but he kept staring at the drum like it was the devil himself. Miss Marple nodded, her knitting resuming its steady rhythm. The vial, the tea tin, the midnight drum, all pointed to a carefully orchestrated plan. The ghostly figure she suspected was a ruse, perhaps a recording or a mechanical device hidden in the drum to mimic its sound. But who had the knowledge, the access, and the motive to execute such a scheme? As the day wore on, a new rumor swept the village. The ghostly figure had been spotted again, this time near the church, striking the drum's echo in the dead of night. Inspector Slack, exasperated, arrested a local vagrant, declaring the case closed. "Just a troublemaker," he told the villagers, "trying to scare folks." But Miss Marple knew it was too convenient, too tidy. The vagrant, a harmless wanderer named Old Tom, had no connection to the manor or the drum. The true culprit, she was certain, was among her suspects. She recalled a detail from her midnight visit. The scuff mark on the study floor matched the heel of Victor's polished shoes seen at her tea gathering. But Victor lacked the botanical knowledge to use foxgloves. Caldwell, however, had both the plants and the opportunity, and his book on folklore suggested familiarity with the drum's legend. Blackwood's late-night presence was damning, but his motive seemed purely financial. And Lydia, her emotional turmoil could mask guilt or simply grief. As the church clock chimed noon, Miss Marple set her knitting aside and reached for her shawl. The investigation was deepening, the threads tightening. The drum's hollow heart held the key, and she was determined to uncover it, one careful step at a time. Chapter 7. Unraveling threads. Hidden in the drum's hollow compartment were weaving a tapestry of suspicion, and she was determined to discern its pattern. The previous night's discovery of the vial had been a breakthrough, confirming her suspicion that Sir Reginald's death was no mere heart attack, as Inspector Slack insisted. The vial's powdery residue, concealed in the drum's secret compartment, suggested poison, likely digitalis, derived from foxgloves, which could mimic a natural death if administered carefully. The tea tin, kept near the drum and used nightly by Sir Reginald, was the perfect vehicle for such a poison, dosed gradually to avoid suspicion. The ghostly figure, striking the drum at midnight, was a clever misdirection, designed to fuel the curse narrative and divert attention from a human hand. But whose hand? Victor Hawthorne, with his greedy ambitions? Lydia Grant, driven by unrequited love? Reverend Caldwell, cloaking zeal in piety? Or Silas Blackwood, the calculating antique dealer? Each had a motive, but the method required cunning and opportunity, and Miss Marple was closing in. Determined to tighten the threads, Miss Marple began her day with a visit to the village doctor, Dr. Haydock, a kindly man with a sharp mind and a reputation for discretion. She found him in his surgery, a small room smelling of antiseptic and old books, his desk cluttered with medical journals. "Miss Marple," he greeted her, his eyes twinkling behind his spectacles. "I suspect you're not here for a checkup. Is it about poor Sir Reginald?" Indeed, Doctor, Miss Marple replied, settling into a chair and opening her knitting. Inspector Slack assures us it was a heart attack, but I wonder if you might share your observations. Were there any unusual symptoms? Dr. Haydock leaned back, his brow furrowing. Well now, I shouldn't like to contradict Slack, but since you ask, there was something odd. Sir Reginald's heart failure was consistent with his age, but his pupils were slightly dilated, and there was a faint bluish tinge to his lips. I put it down to natural causes at the time, but her tone mild, but her eyes sharp. But I appreciate your candor, Doctor. One last thing, has anyone in the village sought digitalis recently? Perhaps for a heart condition. Dr. Haydock shook his head. Not through me, though I did prescribe a mild dose for Reverend Caldwell last year. He's got a touch of heart trouble himself. Strictly controlled, mind you. Miss Marple thanked him and left, her mind buzzing. Caldwell's access to digitalis, combined with the foxgloves in his garden and his book on African folklore, made him a compelling suspect. His public disapproval of the drum could be a facade, masking a deeper motive. But what? She recalled his defensive posture at her tea gathering, his insistence that the drum was an idol. Was he hiding something more personal? Her next stop was the manor, where she hoped to examine the tea tin more closely. Mrs. Ellis greeted her with a weary smile, her apron crisp despite the strain of recent days. Miss Marple, you're becoming a regular visitor, she said, leading her to the study. I hope you're not caught up in all this ghost nonsense. Not at all, Miss Marple replied, her gaze drifting to the drum still standing on its pedestal. Mrs. Ellis, Cherry mentioned Sir Reginald's special tea blend. Might I see the tin? Mrs. Ellis fetched it from a shelf near the desk. A small ornate tin with a French label, its edges slightly dented. Miss Marple examined it closely, noting the crooked label Cherry had described, as if it had been removed and reapplied. She opened it, the scent of dried tea leaves wafting out, but her keen eyes spotted a faint powdery residue clinging to the rim, barely visible. Has this tin been used since Sir Reginald's death? She asked. No, miss, Mrs. Ellis said. I put it away after, well, you know. It was his favorite, imported from some fancy shop in London. He'd have a cup every night. Said it helped him think. Miss Marple nodded, her suspicions deepening. The tea tin placed near the drum was the ideal delivery method for poison, and the vial's residue suggested it had been used to dose the tea. Emotional turmoil suggested guilt, but her ink smudge might be innocent, a relic of her work as a schoolteacher. Determined to test her theory, Miss Marple enlisted the help of Cherry, who had proven herself a keen observer. Cherry, dear, she said over lunch, I need you to speak with the village chemist, Mr. Hargreaves. Ask if anyone has inquired about foxgloves or digitalis, even casually, and see if Mrs. Price has heard any more about that ghostly figure. Cherry nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. I'll be as subtle as a mouse, miss. Anything else? Yes, Miss Marple said, her tone thoughtful. Keep an ear out for any talk of Sir Reginald's papers. He was an antiquarian, after all. There may be documents related to the drum, perhaps hidden in the study. While Cherry set off on her mission, Miss Marple returned to the vicarage, hoping to catch Reverend Caldwell off guard. She found him in his garden, tending his roses with a pair of pruning shears. The foxgloves stood nearby, their bell-shaped flowers swaying in the breeze. Miss Marple, Caldwell said, his voice booming but his eyes wary. "To what do I owe this visit?" "A small matter, Reverend," she replied, her knitting needles clicking softly. "I was curious about your garden. These foxgloves are lovely, but I understand they can be dangerous." Caldwell's face reddened. "Dangerous? Only if misused. I grow them for their beauty and, well, for a bit of heart tonic, under Dr. Haydock's guidance. Surely you don't think—" "Not at all," Miss Marple interrupted, her tone soothing. "But you were so concerned about the drum. Did Sir Reginald ever mention its history? Perhaps papers or letters about its origins?" Caldwell hesitated, his pruning shears pausing. "Papers? No. He was secretive about his collection. But he did say the drum was valuable. Too valuable, I thought, for a village like ours." His voice carried a note of resentment and knowledge. Victor, with his late-night presence and greed. Blackwood, with his furtive midnight visit. Lydia, whose emotional turmoil might hide guilt. The ghostly figure she suspected was a mechanical trick, perhaps a wind-up device in the drum to mimic its sound. As the church clock chimed 2, Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her mind weaving the clues into a tighter pattern. The truth was close, hidden in the ordinary details of village life, and she was determined to uncover it, one careful stitch at a time. Chapter 8. The Hidden Motive. Timestamp 6000 to 6830. The afternoon light draped St. Mary Mead in a golden haze, softening the outlines of its thatched cottages and casting long shadows across the village green. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and the faint sweetness of late roses, a tranquil facade that belied the undercurrent of suspicion rippling through the community. In her cozy cottage, Miss Jane Marple sat by her parlor window, her knitting needles moving with a steady rhythm, but her mind was a whirl of connections. The death of Sir Reginald Hawthorne, found lifeless beside the hollow drum with its whispered curse, had woven a complex tapestry of clues. The scuff mark in the study, the ink smudge on Miss Lydia Grant's sleeve, the foxgloves in Reverend Caldwell's garden, the tampered tea tin, the empty vial hidden in the drum's secret compartment, and the cryptic note about securing the drum's secret. These threads pointed to a deliberate act, cloaked in the village's fear of a supernatural curse, and Miss Marple was determined to unravel the truth. Her recent discoveries had tightened the net around the suspects. The vial's powdery residue, likely digitalis from foxgloves, suggested poison administered through Sir Reginald's nightly tea, a method subtle enough to mimic a heart attack. The drum's midnight echo, attributed to a ghostly figure, was likely a mechanical trick, designed to fuel superstition and divert suspicion. The note found near Mrs. Price's tea shop hinted at a secret Sir Reginald, their laughter mingling with the distant chime of the clock. But Miss Marple's sharp eyes missed nothing. The furtive glance of a neighbor, the hurried step of a passerby, the subtle tension in the air. At the manor, Mrs. Ellis greeted her with a weary smile, her apron slightly crumpled from days of strain. "Miss Marple, you're back again," she said, leading her to the study. "I don't know what more I can tell you. Inspector Slack says it's all settled. Heart attack, plain and simple." "Inspector Slack is very thorough," Miss Marple replied, her tone mild but her eyes alert. "But I wonder, Mrs. Ellis, if you've noticed anything unusual about Sir Reginald's habits in his final days. His tea, for instance. Or perhaps his papers? Mrs. Ellis frowned, her hands twisting together. Well, now that you mention it, he was fussier than usual about his tea. Kept that tin locked in a drawer when he wasn't using it, which wasn't like him. And his papers. He was sorting through them the day before he died, muttering about keeping things safe. I thought he meant the drum, but he didn't say more. Miss Marple nodded, her gaze drifting to the drum still standing on its mahogany pedestal. And the drum itself. Did anyone show particular interest in it beyond Mr. Blackwood? Mrs. Ellis hesitated, her brow furrowing. Come to think of it, Reverend Caldwell was awfully curious. Kept asking how it worked, whether it had any compartments or such. Said he wanted to understand its pagan mechanics. I thought it odd for a vicar. Miss Marple's needles paused briefly. Caldwell's interest in the drum's mechanics, combined with his foxgloves and folklore book, was increasingly damning. She thanked Mrs. Ellis and approached the drum, her fingers tracing the carved surface until she found the hidden seam. With a gentle press, the compartment clicked open, revealing the vial once more. She examined it closely, noting the powdery residue. Definitely digitalis, she suspected, though confirmation would require testing. She replaced the vial and closed the compartment, her mind racing. And greedy ambitions made him a prime suspect. She found him at the Red Lion, nursing a pint and looking distinctly uneasy. Miss Marple, he said, forcing a smile. You're everywhere these days. Still chasing that cursed nonsense? Not nonsense, Mr. Hawthorne, she replied, settling opposite him with her knitting. I'm curious about your visit to the manor the evening Sir Reginald died. You left early, you said, but the milkman saw you nearby later. Care to explain? Victor's smile faltered, his fingers tightening around his glass. The milkman's mistaken. I was here, at the pub, until 10. Ask Tompkins. I had no reason to linger at the manor. Uncle and I had our talk, and that was that. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Your talk about the inheritance, I presume. It must be a comfort to know the manor will be yours. Victor's face reddened. Look, I didn't kill him, if that's what you're implying. Yes, I'll inherit, but I didn't need to hurry things along. He was old. His voice was defensive, and Miss Marple noted the scuff mark on his shoe, matching the one in the study. It suggested he'd been near the drum, perhaps moving it. But his lack of botanical knowledge made poison an unlikely choice for him. Leaving the pub, Miss Marple sought out Reverend Caldwell, finding him in the church, arranging hymnals with a distracted air. Miss Marple, he said, his voice booming but strained. I hope you're not caught up in this ghost foolishness. It's a distraction from the Lord's work. Indeed, Reverend, she replied, her needles clicking softly. But I'm curious about your visit to Sir Reginald. You were concerned about the drum's mechanics, I hear. Did you examine it closely? Caldwell's face flushed, his hands clenching. I only asked out of concern. Its pagan origins troubled me. I wanted to ensure it wasn't tampered with. His words were halting, and Miss Marple recalled his book on African folklore, which returned to her cottage. Miss Marple pieced together the day's findings. The vial's residue, the tampered tea tin, the note about the drum's secret, all pointed to a calculated murder. The ghostly figure was a ruse, likely a wind-up mechanism in the drum, triggered remotely to mimic its sound. Caldwell's knowledge and access to digitalis made him the prime suspect. But Blackwood's midnight presence and Victor's scuff mark couldn't be ignored. Lydia's emotional turmoil seemed less culpable, and Mrs. Ellis's resentment lacked the sophistication for such a scheme. A breakthrough came late that afternoon, when Cherry returned with news from the tea shop. Mrs. Price heard from the postman that Sir Reginald was auditing the church funds, she said, her eyes wide. He suspected someone was skimming donations, hiding it in fake antique sales. He was going to confront the culprit that night. Miss Marple's heart quickened. The church funds, Reverend Caldwell's domain. The drum, with its hidden compartment, could have concealed evidence of his embezzlement, and Sir Reginald's discovery threatened exposure. Caldwell's motive was now clear. Not just zeal, but self-preservation. The confrontation was imminent, and Miss Marple knew she must act quickly to unmask the truth. As the church clock chimed 4, she set her knitting aside, her mind weaving the final threads. The suspects were narrowing to Caldwell and Blackwood, with Victor a distant possibility. The truth, she was certain, lay in the drum's hollow heart, and she was ready to bring it to light. Chapter 9. The Revelation. Timestamp 6830 to 7700. The evening air in St. Mary Mead was heavy with the promise of autumn rain. The sky a tapestry of bruised clouds that cast a somber pall over the village. Inside the manor house, the drawing room glowed with the soft light of oil lamps, their flickering flames reflecting off the polished mahogany furniture and the delicate porcelain tea service. The scent of beeswax, impatient skepticism. The room was charged with tension. Each guest seated stiffly in the chintz armchairs, their faces a mix of curiosity, unease, and guarded defiance. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, as if echoing the ominous boom of the drum that had haunted the village. "Thank you all for coming," Miss Marple began, her voice gentle but commanding attention. "Sir Reginald's death has cast a shadow over St. Mary Mead, and the talk of a curse, the curse of the hollow drum, has only deepened our unease. But I believe we are dealing not with the supernatural, but with a very human act of deception." Inspector Slack snorted, folding his arms. "Miss Marple, I've said it before. It's a heart attack, plain and simple. Doctor's report confirms it. No need for this theatrics." Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. "Patience, Inspector. The truth often lies in the details we overlook. Let us consider the facts. Sir Reginald was found dead in his study beside the drum, with no visible marks of violence. The village heard its eerie boom at midnight, and whispers of a ghostly figure have fueled talk of a curse. Yet I propose that Sir Reginald was murdered, poisoned, to be precise, with digitalis, administered through his nightly tea." A murmur rippled through the room. Victor leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Poison? That's absurd. Uncle was old. His heart gave out naturally." Lydia clutched her handkerchief, her voice trembling. "Poison? Oh, Miss Marple, how dreadful. Who would do such a thing?" Caldwell's face reddened, his voice booming. "This is preposterous. To suggest murder in our peaceful village. It's the work of that pagan drum, tempting sin." Blackwood's sharp eyes narrowed, his tone smooth. An interesting theory, Miss Marple. But where's your evidence? Poison requires proof. Miss Marple's gaze was steady. Proof, Mr. Blackwood, is precisely what I have. Let us begin with the tea tin, kept near the drum in Sir Reginald's study. Paled. A hidden compartment. That's ingenious. But why hide it there? To reinforce the curse, Miss Marple replied. The drum's midnight boom, attributed to a ghostly figure, was no supernatural event. I suspect a mechanical device, a wind-up mechanism perhaps, hidden within the drum, triggered remotely to mimic its sound. This ruse kept the village focused on superstition, not murder. Slack's eyes narrowed. A mechanism? That's a stretch, Miss Marple. And who's to say who poisoned the tea? Anyone could have tampered with it. Not anyone, Miss Marple said, her voice firm. Let us consider our suspects. Mr. Victor Hawthorne, you stand to inherit the manor and its treasures, including the drum, rumored to be valuable. Your presence near the manor late that night, despite your claim of being at the Red Lion, suggests opportunity. The scuff mark in the study matches your shoes, indicating you were near the drum. Victor's jaw tightened, his voice sharp. I was at the pub. Ask Tompkins. And I don't know anything about poison or compartments. Miss Marple nodded, turning to Lydia. Miss Grant, your affection for Sir Reginald was well known, and your argument with him that evening suggests emotional turmoil. The ink smudge on your sleeve matches his desk blotter, placing you in the study. Did jealousy drive you to act? Lydia's eyes filled with tears. I loved him, Miss Marple, but I'd never hurt him. Yes, we argued. He was obsessed with that drum, not me. But I left by 7, I swear. Miss Marple's gaze shifted to Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood, your interest in the drum was financial, and you were seen near the manor at midnight, despite claiming to be in your room. Your knowledge of antiques suggests you might recognize a hidden compartment. Were you after the drum's secret? Blackwood's smile was tight. I wanted to buy it, yes, but murder? That's absurd. I was in my room, as I said. Your witnesses rigged a mechanism to sound the drum at midnight, reinforcing the curse narrative. Sir Reginald's discovery of your embezzlement threatened your position, your reputation. You killed him to silence him. The room fell silent, the only sound the crackle of the fire. Caldwell's shoulders slumped, his face crumpling. I didn't mean for it to go so far, he whispered. The funds, I borrowed them, meant to pay them back. But he found out, said he'd expose me. I panicked. The drum. It was the perfect cover. I thought the curse would keep people from looking too closely. Slack leapt to his feet, his notebook forgotten. Reverend Caldwell, you're under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Hawthorne. He signaled to a constable waiting outside, who entered to escort Caldwell away. The vicar went quietly, his head bowed, his piety shattered. Victor exhaled, his relief palpable. I knew it wasn't me, but, good Lord, a vicar. Lydia sobbed softly, her handkerchief pressed to her face. I thought it was my fault, arguing with him. Oh, Miss Marple, thank you. Blackwood's expression was unreadable, but he nodded. Clever work, Miss Marple, though I'd have preferred to buy that drum. Mrs. Ellis, pale but composed, murmured, I never suspected. He seemed so holy. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. The human heart, my dear friends, is often the greatest mystery. Reverend Caldwell used the drum's legend to mask his crime. But the truth lies in the ordinary. Scuff marks, tea tins, garden plants. We need only look closely. As the group dispersed, the manor seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. Miss Marple gathered her knitting, her heart light, but her mind already turning to the village's next puzzle. The truth had been found, and St. Mary Mead could rest, at least for now. Chapter 10. Morning Tea and Reflections. Timestamp 7700 to 8530. The morning sun broke through the lingering clouds over St. Mary Mead, bathing the village in a gentle, golden light that seemed to wash. The parlor was a haven of warmth and familiarity, its lace curtains diffusing the sunlight into delicate patterns across the chintz armchairs and the well-worn rug. The scent of tea mingled with the faint perfume of lavender from a vase on the sideboard, and the distant chime of the church clock added a soothing cadence to the morning. Miss Marple's guests arrived promptly. Cherry Baker, her young maid, whose sharp eyes and knack for gossip had proven invaluable. Mrs. Florence Price, the tea shop proprietress, whose ear for village talk had supplied key clues, and Dr. Haydock, the village doctor, whose medical insights had confirmed the cause of Sir Reginald's death. Inspector Slack, though invited, had sent his regrets, grumbling about paperwork but conceding, grudgingly, that Miss Marple's instincts had been correct. As the group settled around the table, Cherry poured the tea with her usual cheer, her apron crisp despite the early hour. "Miss Marple," she said, her eyes bright, "I still can't believe it was the vicar. Reverend Caldwell, of all people, poisoning Sir Reginald and using that drum to scare everyone. It's like something out of a novel." Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile, her blue eyes twinkling behind her spectacles. "Human greed, my dear Cherry, is often more dramatic than any novel. But let us start at the beginning, so we may understand how the threads came together." Mrs. Price leaned forward, her floral apron rustling. "I knew that drum was trouble the moment Sir Reginald showed it at the village hall. All that talk of a curse. Turns out it was just a cover for a wicked plan." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, sipping her tea. "Sir Reginald's death appeared to be a heart attack, as Inspector Slack insisted, but the signs were there for those who looked closely. His dilated pupils, the bluish tinge to his lips. These pointed to digitalis poisoning, as Dr. Haydock confirmed." Dr. Haydock nodded, his spectacles glinting. "You were spot on, Miss Marple. Digitalis, derived from foxgloves, can mimic figure. Was no supernatural event. Reverend Caldwell, with his knowledge of African folklore from a book in his study, understood the drum's mechanics. He rigged a wind-up device inside its compartment to sound at midnight, reinforcing the curse narrative and keeping suspicion at bay." Mrs. Price shook her head, her teacup clinking against its saucer. "And to think I saw that so-called ghost from my window. 3 slow booms, then it vanished. I should have known it was too convenient." "Convenience," Miss Marple said, "is often the hallmark of misdirection. The ghostly figure was a ruse, designed to fuel the village's fears and divert attention from the true crime. But other clues pointed to the truth. The scuff mark in the study, matching Mr. Victor Hawthorne's shoes. The ink smudge on Miss Lydia Grant's sleeve, linking her to Sir Reginald's desk. The foxgloves in Reverend Caldwell's garden, a source of digitalis. And Mr. Silas Blackwood's furtive presence near the manor at midnight. Dr. Haydock leaned back, his brow furrowed. But why Caldwell? I mean, a vicar, stealing from the church funds? It's shocking. Miss Marple's needles, now in motion, clicked softly. The motive was hidden, as motives often are, in the ordinary. Sir Reginald, an antiquarian with a meticulous nature, was auditing the church funds which Reverend Caldwell managed. He discovered discrepancies. Donations siphoned off, disguised as payments for fake antique sales. Caldwell, desperate to protect his reputation, knew Sir Reginald planned to confront him. The drum, with its legend of a curse, provided the perfect cover. He dosed the tea with digitalis using the vial hidden in the drum, and triggered the mechanism to sound it at midnight. Ensuring, the village blamed a curse, not a man. Cherry shivered, setting down the teapot. It's chilling, miss. He seemed so pious, always preaching about sin, and all the while argument, and her ink smudge placed her in the study. But her emotional turmoil was grief, not guilt. Mr. Silas Blackwood, eager to buy the drum, was seen near the manor at midnight, suggesting he might have sought its secret. A hidden document, perhaps, or the vial itself. But his motive was financial, not personal, and he lacked access to the tea tin. Dr. Haydock sipped his tea, his expression thoughtful. And Mrs. Ellis? She had access to the tea, didn't she? Indeed, Miss Marple said, her eyes twinkling. Mrs. Ellis, the housekeeper, resented Sir Reginald's frugality. But her loyalty to the manor was genuine. She lacked the cunning to devise such a scheme, and her surprise at the tampered tea tin was sincere. No, the threads all led to Reverend Caldwell, whose desperation drove him to murder. Cherry leaned forward, her voice eager. But that note, miss, the one about securing the drum's secret, what was it? Miss Marple's smile was serene. The note, found near Mrs. Price's shop, was Sir Reginald's reminder to protect evidence of the embezzlement. Perhaps receipts or ledgers he intended to present to the authorities. He hid them in the drum's compartment, unaware that Caldwell would use the same hiding place for his poison. The drum, meant to expose a crime, became the tool of another. Mrs. Price clucked her tongue. Poor Sir Reginald. He loved his artifacts, didn't he? And that drum causing all this trouble. What'll happen to it now? It has been donated to the village museum, Miss Marple said, its mechanism removed and its secrets laid bare. The curse, I trust, will trouble us no more. As the tea grew cool, the conversation turned to lighter matters, the upcoming village fete, the children's antics, the promise of a quiet winter. Victor, cleared of suspicion, had inherited the manor and vowed to preserve it, though Miss Marple suspected he'd sell the more valuable artifacts. Lydia, her heart lighter, had resumed teaching, her classes filled with chatter about the new. Was always there, hidden in the everyday, waiting for those who looked closely enough to find it.